The slope away from the lake wasn't very steep, but no sooner was Twilight under the canopy of the surrounding forest than she was stumbling and tripping with every step, her weary hooves rebelliously seeping out every crotch of roots or cleaves of rocks to catch onto. The branches above her clawed at her mane and the sky equally. The remains unfallen leaves blocked the light from the moon high overhead, the mist rolling in from the water past her, twirling in the haze over what she could see, and adding a haunting quality to her panting and snapping on the dry underbrush. It turned every tree and rock into a phantom that seemed to leap out at her with every move she made. Twilight stumbled deeper into the trees until her lungs ached more than her wings and legs as she collapsed and raced towards mushrooms-covered swamp.
What have you done?
Twilight jumped. The voice came from everywhere around her, bouncing off the ground and trees. It was cold, almost emotionless, as if the question was rhetorical. She squirmed, scanning the dark mist for anything to latch onto, but nothing moved. The trees around her lay silent and still. Pressing herself against the wood, Twilight took a deep breath and fired her horn with a simple light spell. It was the same one that she had used in the ruined castles of the two sisters earlier. Balls of light burst as lanterns forming around her.
What is that thing? What does it want?
Even with the added light, Twilight could still only make out the first few layers of the forest around her. What was this thing? What does it want? With a mental command, she sent the little balls of light around her, darting in every direction, confining through the shadows with each tree and shrub it passed. The mist glittered with each wisp, but otherwise ate up all the illumination in just a few yards. Outside her own rage breathing and hammering heart, nothing moved. The forest was deadly still. Twilight sat there, ears perked up and twitching back and forth, her eyes wide as saucers. She searched. She watched for movement, listening for the snapping of twigs or the crushing of leaves that would telegram her pursuer's location. Time moved at a crawl while her body continued to add the growing list of complications. The ground was wet and cold, soaking through her tail. The mossy stump was rough, jabbing at her back and flank in a dozen places. Her wings were on fire from the aerial stern over the pond, and were now being crushed by her body and the dead tree that sheltered it. Muscles were numb or aching. She was starting to shiver more than the deeply chill called for.
I can't stay out here like this.
Twilight turned her head slowly, still scanning the area.
I'm going to be in real trouble if I go into shock. I need to find shelter. Is Sakura's hut in this direction?
Twilight shook her head, dismissing the thought. Sakura's hut was well into the Everfree, back towards the castle where all of this had started. There was no way she'd make that trip in this condition. Flight seemed out of the question. She wasn't strong enough to manage a teleportation spell of any length. Walking was highly suspicious at this point, even if she distracted the fact that it was dark.
Plus, I don't want to lead whatever this thing is back to any pony else.
The forest remained still. Twilight took a deep breath and held it in for a second, willing her pulse to slow. She pushed off the stump with one hoof, the effort to lift her back into the standing position, forcing all the air out of her in a panting grunt. She tethered there in place, finding her balance and calling back in the conjunction points of light to whoever around her in a loose halo.
Please, let there be a cabin or shack nearby.
She took a shaky step forward. A rueful grin smiled at her muzzle.
This would be the part of the movie where Applejack would start ranting about dumb mares and horror stories. Sorry to disappoint, AJ, but I need a place to rest. It's not like I'm being chased by the headless horse.
The next step was shaky, but the one that followed was a bit more firm. Every plod of hoof on the bed of leaves and the forest floor helped steady her. Her heartbeat was still going like a jackhammer, and everything ached, but she had a goal. She had a mental checklist of every step was one like a box tipped off. First was getting herself moving, but carefully this time. Next was finding shelter and seeing the aches that felt worse. Then figured out what was chasing her. Then she had to defeat it, probably. Twilight shook her head, thinking that far ahead was making her feel fuzzy and lightheaded. She did much favor in chance of fighting it. It would be better, she reasoned, to simply last out until daylight. Then she could find her way out to either her friends or the princesses, something that gave her leg up on something shadowy or out of this world. Twilight stopped, or at least stumbled, to a half in the forest undergrowth. A break in the canopy above allowed the moonlight to light her way, but it also allowed her to see the gathering clouds that were threatening to steal what was little illumination that the moon provided. As she watched, the slow-moving cloud mesmerized by the slow, unhalting mass. Something fell. The sky hit her right in the eye, forcing her to blink away in sudden tears.
What the?
Twilight sputtered, taking a half step back, but when she looked again, it became clear.
Snow? Snow? It's not even winter yet. What in Celestia's name is going on here?
There was a sharp crack off the left of the fog-shadowed undergrowth. A branch snapped like a heavy hoof had came down on it, and Twilight jumped, kicking incoherently. She hit the forest floor in an ungraceful gallop, diving out of the silvery cold moonlight and the snow into the deeper brush. The wan light from the wisps did nothing to slow her, and anything resembling a path she dodged poorly around each tree as it came up, scratching bark and moss off with each pass.
What have you done?
The voice was right behind her, the breath colder than the surrounding air. Twilight yelled and moved faster, banking off the oak tree like a pony stabbed a billiard ball.
What? What are you talking about?
This is all your fault, Twilight Sparkle.
No, it isn't. I don't know what you mean.
Another tree loomed out of the mist, larger than the others, with low-hanging branches. Twilight bucked, prancing to the side of it as she took a slap in the face as she ran her head first into a clump of leaves, still holding on. Roots, thicker than the branches, reached up and hit her in the ankles and sent her flying in an uncontrollable tumble. She croaked, choking on the crispy leaves fibers, and came into a bone-chilling halt several yards in the crevices in the forest floor where some other massive tree had once stood. Twilight spat out a mouth full of leaves and took a look back over her shoulder. Above her, the tree that she had tripped over hung dangerously over the ravine, blocking out even the cloudy sky. Her whipslight reaching the end of the mana, her spell were starting to stumble like candles at the end of their wicks. As she watched, hoarfrost formed on the exposed roots like some twinkling crystal stone wood rot. And right in the middle of the massive rot root, and hoof prints appeared. Then another on the root below it. Then another. One by one, the hoof prints appeared with the casual place of predator combined with the grace of a princess decorating the stars of one of the candlelight's galas.
You did this. Cast me into deeper darkness than I ever knew. You did it all without a thought to how I might feel about that, didn't you?
The voice followed the encroaching forest and was colder still. It sounded hollow and broken, far away and muttered, as if it came from some other place than the forest around them.
I wonder, do you even think of that moment? Is it a memory that keeps you up at night? Does it infect your dreams? Or is it swept away under the rug like unwanted filth? Is it a non-entity in your life? Something no pony remembers, save for the history books.
Twilight didn't answer. She kicked, twisted back around to dig her hooves into the dirt and loamy earth of her little ravine and push herself away from the approaching darkness.
I don't know what you're talking about!
The leaves in the brush parted, leaving her deeper to the past, more grasping roots and stones, and the last of her light died. But no more it revealed the void. A hole in the wall of soil putting into the side of her. Twilight didn't care about what could be lurking in there. She dove head first, the hiss of frost eternally roars behind her as she jumped into the cave.
Support me on Patreon and Ko-fi. Links in the description. Thanks for listening and be sure to subscribe. Good night, every pony.